The night I came back to my house in Bar Harbor, the cold met me before I even set my bag down. The place felt stripped of every bit of warmth, the kind of chill that settles into your joints and refuses to move. A tap on the thermostat did nothing. The screen showed a locked setting, something I'd never used, and the heat stayed dead. A call to the maintenance hotline put me on hold for a minute before a man answered. He said, "Sir, if your heat is disabled during temperatures like this, you should check that you're safe to stay there. Make sure nothing's leaking or frozen." I told him I'd look through the knot in my stomach had already formed. The utility panel sat near the back room. When my hand brushed the metal pipe, it felt colder than it ever should. Someone had turned the emergency shut-off valve an action that required intention, not accident. The maintenance rep hadn't said much more than they'd send someone in the morning, but that discovery kept echoing long after the call ended. "Lily, were you at the house this week?" Her answer landed fast and sharp. "Why are you asking me if you knew how to take care of things you wouldn't panic over a thermostat?" "It's not the thermostat. Someone turned the heat off at the valve." "Well, it wasn't me. Maybe check what you did before assuming stuff." No concern, no curiosity, just that careless tone she'd adopted over the past few years, half impatience, half irritation. The line closed before I could respond. Standing there holding the phone, a thought crept in: who else had the code to my door? The maintenance team couldn't arrive until the next day, so I dug through a storage bin for the old space heater I kept for storms. Dust fell off the casing as it powered up with a weak hum. The temperature in the room rose only slightly enough to take the edge off, but not enough to settle my nerves. A few minutes passed while I tried to make sense of the evening. The valve didn't turn itself. That much I knew, and the lock on the thermostat suggested someone wanted that cold to stay. I kept replaying Lily's tone, the way she dismissed the whole thing. She hadn't even asked if I was all right. That detail stayed with me longer than the cold. Paul Garrison stepped through the doorway with a toolbox in one hand and a clipboard tucked under his arm. He greeted me with a nod, then went straight to the furnace closet as if he'd walked this route 100 times. His pace told me he already suspected something unusual. He crouched by the control panel, ran a gloved hand along the wiring, and said, "This lock wasn't triggered by a system fault. Someone set it manually." A few taps later, he lifted the cover to the emergency valve. And this shouldn't be turned unless there's a hazard. Whoever did it knew exactly what they were touching. A metal latch on the service cabinet hung unevenly. Paul pointed at it with the end of a screwdriver. "See that the cap's crooked. Looks like somebody opened it and didn't bother to line it up again." Nothing about his tone was dramatic. It was the practicality of a man who'd seen too many homes tampered with for reasons that rarely ended well. A dull heaviness settled in my chest as he spoke. He asked, "Anyone else come and go in the last few days?" Without answering, I fetched my phone and pulled up the log from the smart lock. The screen displayed a single entry Lily's code used 3 days earlier. Paul watched for a moment, then breathed out through his nose. "Richard, you should change your access list," he said, "and consider switching to a physical key. Codes get passed around too easily." His advice wasn't pushy, just firm, shaped by experience. He finished the inspection, tightened the cabinet latch, and repeated that the system needed a full reset. The earliest appointment was midday tomorrow. After he left, a restlessness pushed me to put on my coat and head toward Bangor. The drive wasn't long, but the silence in the truck carried more weight than usual. My stop was the public assistance office. A row of chairs filled the reception area, though I barely noticed them. A staff member led me to a small desk where a woman looked up from her computer. She introduced herself as Marianne Brooks. Her expression was steady, not unkind, but sharpened by years of dealing with complicated family paperwork. "How can I help you, Mr. Hale?" she asked. I'm checking on some documents related to a heating benefit, I said. There might have been a mistake. She typed for a moment, then scanned the screen. We tried contacting you last week regarding a capacity assessment form. The call didn't go through. A pause formed between us. What form? I asked. The one requesting evaluation of your ability to manage personal matters. It was submitted under your name. She turned her monitor slightly so I could see. My gaze locked onto the section labeled Applicant Representative Lily Hale. Something pulled tight in my throat. I didn't file this. I didn't authorize anyone to file it. Marianne studied my reaction before speaking again. It happens more often than people think. Sometimes relatives believe they're helping. Sometimes not. Her words trailed off, not as a judgment, but as a practiced caution. A printed notice lay on her desk. She slid it toward me so I could read it clearly. The form stated that a temporary review had begun based on concerns raised by the representative regarding the applicant's functional decline. The phrase struck harder than I expected. Functional decline. As if my judgment belonged to some committee. As if my daughter could decide when my independence ended. Are you certain there isn't another Richard Hale listed? I asked. We cross-checked your date of birth, address, and insurance number, she replied. Everything matches. The room didn't spin. Nothing dramatic happened. Just a sense of something shifting beneath my feet the way a dock moves slightly under you when you aren't prepared. Marianne didn't offer comfort. She simply stated facts. This is under preliminary review. No action has been taken yet, but you should know why we attempted to contact you. Her professionalism steadied the moment in a way I wasn't ready for. She gave no advice, only information, and that made it hit harder. The drive to the resort near the shoreline took less than an hour, though the tension carried longer. A valet waved me forward, but I parked on my own and walked toward the lobby. Music drifted from a banquet room, mixed with bursts of conversation. My daughter had built a career managing events like this, and she thrived on being seen as the one who kept everything running. A staff member pointed me toward the hallway, leading to the conference wing. Lily stood near a display table directing 2 servers while checking her tablet. Her posture stiffened as soon as she noticed me. Lily, I said, keeping my voice steady. I need a minute. Her eyes darted towards the guests. You can't just show up here, I'm working. It won't take long. She exhaled sharply, then stepped aside with me, though her gaze kept drifting back to the room. What do you want? She asked. The heat was shut off at my house. Someone used your code to get in, and your name is on a form at the assistant's office asking for an evaluation of my mental capacity. Her mouth tightened. You're overreacting. That house is old. Systems break. The lock on the panel was set manually, and the form wasn't a clerical error. She looked away, then folded her arms. I only filed that because you've been forgetting things. You leave tools on the porch you miss, calls you don't check emails. I'm trying to help you prepare for the future. By taking control of my affairs without asking me, I was doing what needed to be done. You never plan ahead. Someone has to. A server walked by with a tray. Lily straightened instantly, pasted on a professional smile, then returned her focus to me as soon as he passed. Her tone changed, turning sharper. If you're going to accuse me of something, maybe don't do it where my colleagues can see. This isn't the place. I didn't choose the place. You wouldn't answer the phone. She gave a short, bitter laugh. Maybe because every call turns into a lecture. Another employee, a young woman with a headset, interrupted. Lily, the corporate team is asking if the seating chart is final. Lily nodded, waved her off, then faced me again, jaw set. Her voice dropped. If you hadn't barged in tonight, people wouldn't be staring. You make things harder than they need to be. That line cut deeper than any argument we'd had. Not because it was harsh, she'd said worse, but because she delivered it with the same flat certainty she used when discussing flawed logistics at work. Not anger, not confusion, just inconvenience. "I didn't come here to embarrass you," I said. "Well, that's what happened," she replied. Something in her expression told me this wasn't a moment of stress. It was a pattern. A long one I had ignored. A coordinator called her name from the end of the hall. Lily adjusted her blazer, straightened her hair, and said, "We're done talking. I'll check on the paperwork later. Just go home." She walked away before I could answer. I stepped back toward the lobby, taking a slower route past the check-in desk. A young man from the front staff called out, "Sir, are you Richard Hale?" "Yes." He held out a cream-colored envelope. "Ms. Hale left this near the counter earlier. Looked important." The envelope felt heavier than expected. I opened it on the spot. The first page stopped me cold, a photocopy of a petition for full financial guardianship. My name sat at the top. Lily's signature stood at the bottom. A stamp marked pending verification. The legal phrasing was blunt. It suggested I could no longer manage property, that my decisions needed supervision, that someone else, my own daughter, should take control. A wave of disbelief passed through me, followed by something harder to identify, not anger exactly, but a kind of erosion. A sinking recognition that she had already moved far ahead in whatever plan she thought justified. "Everything all right, sir?" the receptionist asked. I folded the papers carefully. "I'm fine. Thank you." Marianne looked up as soon as she saw the envelope in my hand. She motioned for me to sit, then opened the folder on her desk. Her eyes moved quickly across the photocopied pages before she let out a controlled breath. "This petition is on our expedited list," she said. "It qualifies as a potential emergency because it claims you're unable to manage your affairs. That triggers a faster review." A monitor glowed between us as she pulled up the digital file. My name stood in bold lettering, followed by a signature I recognized and didn't recognize. The loops, the slant, even the spacing, all of it mirrored my handwriting but not my actions. "That's not mine," I said. Marianne studied the screen again. The signature was submitted electronically. It's formatted to appear authentic, but the metadata shows inconsistencies. If you confirm it's fraudulent, I can escalate this to the oversight unit. Her phrasing was careful, as if each word needed to land without stirring trouble before its time. The idea of placing my own daughter under investigation felt heavier than any weight I'd carried in years. Still, the page in front of me made it difficult to defend her. "You need to understand something," she continued. "If this petition is approved before we intervene, Ms. Hale could temporarily freeze your accounts. The authority granted is broad." Those words pushed the hesitation out of my lungs. "How long do we have?" "Not long. The file is already being screened." She waited for my answer, but the decision wouldn't form. The sense of betrayal pressed harder than the cold ever could. A moment passed before she gently closed the folder. "Take a breath. When you're ready, we'll proceed." The building felt warmer than the air outside, yet the walk to my truck carried a strain that didn't fade. Anger wasn't the strongest part of it. Disbelief carried the lead, followed by something resembling shame, though I couldn't explain why. Stopping at the bank became the only logical move. A manager brought me into a small consultation room, typed in my account details, and frowned at the screen. "There was a request 3 days ago to link a secondary user," she said. "Name, Lily Hale." Her tone stayed neutral, but the look she gave me wasn't. It lingered between sympathy and confusion. "It wasn't approved," she said, "because we still needed verification. Would you like us to put an alert on your accounts?" "Yes, immediately." She made several entries, then printed a confirmation. You should also update your passwords, and consider restricting account changes to in-person requests only. The thought of my daughter arranging access to my finances set off a deeper ache than any conflict we'd had. Planning submitting forms using my name, she'd done it all without hesitation. That realization carried more force than any raised voice or argument. The drive back toward Bar Harbor stretched longer than usual. Clouds pressed low over the highway, though the real weight sat in my chest. By the time I pulled into my driveway, evening had slipped in. The temporary heater Paul installed hummed with a faint, uneven rhythm, working harder than it should. Coat still on, I stood in the living room and tried to gather a plan. Something structured, something steady. My phone buzzed before a single thought could settle. An email banner scrolled across the screen, request for identity confirmation, submitted by Lily Hale for financial documentation. It came from the resort's administrative office. She'd used my information again, this time tied to her workplace. Another attempt, another justification she'd eventually insist was for my own good. The phone stayed in my hand as I walked to the kitchen, though I wasn't sure why I'd moved. No answer waited in that room either. The heater clicked. Pipes settled. Nothing in the house felt familiar anymore, even though nothing had changed. My thumb hovered over Marianne's number, then fell away. A call that late wouldn't help. Instead, I set the phone on the counter and leaned both hands against the edge, trying to steady a thought long enough to weigh my choices. The email sat unread on the screen, though I could see enough from the preview to know what it meant. Another layer, another warning, another claim being built in my name. By morning, my phone had filled with messages from nearly every institution tied to my name. Banks flagged unusual attempts to alter permissions. Insurance asked for confirmation on a benefits modification request. Even the utility company forwarded a notice asking whether I intended to add a secondary decision-maker. All of them expected a response. A sinking thought formed Lily wasn't slowing down. Dialing her number felt necessary, but the call ended before the first ring finished. Another attempt produced the same immediate rejection. No text followed, no explanation, nothing even resembling hesitation. While I scrolled through the alerts, tires crunched over the driveway. Paul stepped out of his city truck, carrying another toolkit. "Morning, Richard," he called. "Got your system parts? Should wrap up the job today." He set his tools down and opened the furnace cabinet. "Before I start, you should know someone filed a home safety evaluation under your name. The request went through the city portal yesterday." "An evaluation?" I asked. "Yeah, usually it's for folks who might not be managing well on their own. They check mobility fall risks, that kind of thing." His choice of words struck sharply, not because he meant harm, but because someone else clearly did. "Did they say who filed it?" "Only the representative's name. Looked familiar, your daughter's surname. Might be a coincidence." It wasn't a coincidence, not after everything I'd seen. Paul resumed working, unaware of the pressure closing in on me. A message from Marianne interrupted my thoughts. When I answered, her tone carried more urgency than the day before. "Richard, the petition has shifted to special oversight," she said. "The legal division is preparing to intervene. They'll likely contact you soon. I wanted you to hear it from me first." "What happens next?" "They review the inconsistencies in the file. Because of the content, the inquiry could expand." She didn't elaborate, but I understood. An expanded inquiry meant Lily was no longer just filing forms. She was entering territory that warranted legal scrutiny. It felt as if two storms were converging, one from within my family, one from the city's bureaucratic machinery. Both closing in faster than I could steady myself. A thought crept forward, unwelcome but persistent. Had I shown signs of slipping, I'd misplaced my wallet twice last month. Missed a dental appointment. Forgot to winterize the shed until Paul reminded me. Ordinary lapses, yet under the wrong lens, even the smallest misstep could be twisted into evidence. Maybe that was how Lily justified all of this. Maybe she believed her own reasoning. Before I could settle into that line of doubt, a knock landed on the door. Not a soft tap official, deliberate. A woman in a navy jacket held a clipboard. "Mr. Hale." "Yes." "I'm from the Department of Social Support. We're here for an emergency functional check. It shouldn't take long." A second evaluator stepped forward, carrying forms. Because the petition flagged potential risk, we're required to complete an in-home assessment. The phrase in-home assessment hit like a hammer. Not only was I being evaluated, the assumption behind it cast me as someone who needed intervention. They entered with practiced efficiency. One asked me to confirm my birth date, then rattled off questions about medication mobility and daily routines. Another walked through the main rooms, making notes, pausing to comment on the space heater Paul had temporarily installed. "Do you feel safe managing your home environment?" she asked. "Of course," I said. The pen in her hand paused for a second before moving again. The evaluation went on with a procedural coldness that stripped me of any sense of autonomy. They weren't unkind, but their process treated me as a case file, rather than a person whose life had been functioning without interference until someone decided it shouldn't. Paul kept working nearby, pretending not to overhear, though his brow tightened every time another question surfaced. One evaluator stepped aside to make a brief call. "Yes, we're completing the check now. No hazards so far. Yes, we'll upload the report shortly." Her tone conveyed nothing personal, yet each word built another rung in the ladder Lily had set under me. When they finally handed me a copy of the preliminary report, the summary read, "No immediate threat observed. Recommend further documentation review." They left as efficiently as they'd arrived, leaving the house feeling smaller than before. Paul glanced toward me. "Didn't mean to overhear, but those checks aren't usually done unless someone pushes pretty hard." He resumed tightening a bolt on the furnace. "Your system's running now. Should stabilize in a few hours." The phone rang before I'd even put the assessment papers down. Marianne's name flashed across the screen. "Richard, I need you to come in," she said. "There's new information about your file and it can't wait." Her tone carried a firmness that pushed me back into my coat. The drive to Bangor blurred around the edges, not from speed, but from the weight of too many things happening at once. When I stepped into her office, she already had a stack of printouts on the desk. She tapped the top sheet. "We pulled the metadata attached to the electronic signature," she said. "The device used to sign the petition doesn't match any of the devices registered under your name. Here, look at this." A chart displayed numbers, timestamps, and a device ID I didn't recognize. Next to it, another line listed the signatures attributed to me. "This proves the signature wasn't yours," she continued. "It came from a device associated with the same IP used in Ms. Hale's earlier submissions." A mixture of relief and disbelief settled into my chest. For the first time in days, something leaned in my favor. The proof was right there, hard to argue, impossible to excuse. The pause didn't last. A knock sounded at the doorway. A member of the legal unit stepped in carrying a folder marked "Urgent." "I thought you should know," he said, addressing both of us. "Ms. Hale submitted another form early this morning. It classifies her father as requiring full daily assistance. She's attempting to expedite the petition." The relief that had begun forming slid away. "She filed another one?" I asked. "Yes, and this one uses stronger language. If it clears the preliminary screen, it could accelerate everything." Marianne frowned. "That makes it more critical to intervene quickly. Otherwise, the agency may act before we can correct the record." His departure left a dense stillness in the room. Marianne folded her hands. Richard, I'm going to say something difficult. You should consider requesting a temporary restriction on your daughter's access to your legal and financial information. It's a protective measure, nothing more. That feels... I know, she said gently, but these filings indicate intent, and intent is what the reviewers look at. The idea of placing a barrier between myself and my only child struck deeper than any legal phrase on the forms. That didn't make the situation less real. Before I could answer my phone, buzzed again another email notification. The resort's administrative office requested identity verification linked to a financial sponsorship Lily had apparently claimed under my name. A sponsorship I knew nothing about. Marianne lifted her eyebrows slightly. She's using your information across multiple platforms. That's a pattern, Richard. Her words didn't accuse. They simply reflected what the evidence already showed. I need time to think, I said. Of course, but don't take too long. These processes move quickly. Leaving the building felt like stepping out of one storm, only to walk into another. I reached the parking lot before the phone rang again, this time from a number belonging to a bank I rarely used. Mr. Hale, a voice asked when I answered. Yes. I'm calling to confirm an attempt to open a linked account under your profile. We need verification to proceed. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. I didn't request that. Thank you. We'll freeze the application and flag your file. He hung up before I could ask anything else. Papers covered the kitchen table forms from the bank copies of Lily's petitions, the technical logs Marianne printed, and the assessment report from the social worker. A yellow bulb hung over the table, and its steady glow made the ink look darker, the signatures sharper. Each page told a small part of the story, but lined up together they painted something far more deliberate than I had wanted to admit. Months of shrugged-off remarks, unexplained visits, and her insistence on planning ahead finally aligned. My willingness to avoid conflict had given her room to build an entire case behind my back. That realization didn't arrive with anger or heartbreak. It arrived with a heaviness that settled somewhere deeper. A knock sounded at the door. Paul stepped in with his usual half-smile and held up a canvas tool bag. Got your set here. Forgot to drop it off yesterday. He set it on the counter, then glanced at the spread of documents. Looks like you're doing some kind of audit. Something like that, I said. He rubbed his neck. One thing I forgot to mention earlier, whoever turned that emergency valve knew what they were doing. It's not the sort of thing someone stumbles on. When you showed me the panel the first time, the placement of the shutoff was too exact to be an accident. His comment struck a nerve. Not because he meant harm, but because he was right. Someone had prepared for that moment. Paul nodded toward the table. Hope things get sorted, Richard. You've had a lot thrown at you this week. After he left the house, fell still enough that my thoughts started connecting themselves. The altered signature, the repeated account attempts, the new filings, the safety review, none of it existed in isolation. Lily had mapped her steps in advance. The next morning I drove to Bangor again. Marianne saw the folder under my arm and motioned me into a private room. Are you ready to move forward? She asked. Yes. Help me file the fraud investigation request. She didn't show triumph or relief, just quiet resolve as she gathered the forms. We'll need timestamp submission IDs and evidence of unauthorized access. The more precise the documentation, the faster legal review can act. We spent nearly an hour compiling the details. Each digital record verified Lily's activity, every login time, every uploaded document, every device ID tied to her account. Marianne slid the completed packet across the desk. Here it is. Once I submit this, oversight will freeze pending actions. It prevents any petition from advancing until the investigation is finished. A phone pinged on her desk as she uploaded the file. There, she said. The system shows your daughter's requests locked. The shift felt subtle but real. For the first time since this began, Lily no longer had the advantage of time. The legal division sent a formal notice to the resort where she worked. Protocol required them to alert employers when fraudulent guardianship filings intersected with financial responsibilities. Later that afternoon, an email arrived confirming her suspension from duties involving client accounts. I had barely finished reading when my phone rang. Lily's voice broke the moment the call connected. "How could you do this?" she demanded. "You actually went to them. You're trying to ruin me." "I didn't file anything without evidence," I said. "You didn't have to go that far," she shot back. "If you keep pushing, I'll lose everything. Stop this now if you still think of me as your family." Her words cracked at the edges, but the pressure behind them remained sharp. "I can't talk about this right now," I said, and ended the call before she could respond. The silence afterward wasn't calm. It was thick, unsettled tense in a way that felt new. Guilt tried to rise, but not enough to drown out the truth of what she had done. Late in the afternoon, I sat back at the kitchen table, looking over the same documents from the night before. Nothing in them changed. Nothing about the pattern shifted. My decision to move forward wasn't rash. It simply arrived later than it should have. The letter from the city arrived 2 days before Christmas. The envelope carried the seal of the legal division, and the language inside it left nothing open to interpretation. Lily's filings were formally declared fraudulent. Her claims about my supposed decline had been rejected, and the investigation into attempted asset seizure moved to the next tier. The words looked clinical on the page: intent misrepresentation, forged electronic authentication, yet each one landed with its own weight. A second notice followed an hour later, this time from the resort. Lily was placed on indefinite suspension from all event and client finance duties. The message included a short line about internal policy and reputational risk. No commentary beyond that. It didn't need any. I didn't feel triumph. The truth settled in a place that wasn't joy, anger, or relief. It felt more like stepping into a room I'd lived beside for years without ever opening the door. A room where all the unspoken disappointments lived stacked in boxes I'd never examined. The house needed attention, so I focused on that. A locksmith came early the next morning. "Any changes to the access list?" he asked. "Remove one code," I said. When he finished, the keypad beeped with a new rhythm, erasing the pattern Lily had used for years. Updating the rest took the better part of the afternoon. Email accounts, utility portals, insurance settings. Even the door to the shed had to be rekeyed. Each change felt like sanding down an old splinter-mild sting, then clean surface. While sorting through a drawer of manuals, a knock sounded. Paul stepped in carrying a box. "Got the final parts for your heating system," he said. "Thought I'd help you finish this before the holiday." He moved around the furnace with practiced efficiency. "Unit should run smoother now. The earlier patch was just temporary." "Thank you," I said. He gave a brief nod. "Hope things settle for you. Folks don't always realize the damage they cause until someone stops them." The comment wasn't pointed, only seasoned. He gathered the old components and left without ceremony. Later, while discarding outdated papers, a message came from Marianne. Just one sentence. "You protected yourself, and that was the right call. No warmth, no condolences, exactly the kind of message I needed. Clear, spare, grounded. Evening edged in. The heater Paul installed gave a steady pulse through the house, the first consistent warmth in weeks. I made a small meal, ate standing at the counter, then washed the pan without much thought. The rhythm of the day carried me along, and the absence of interruptions felt almost unfamiliar. Christmas Eve arrived without any plans. The town carried on with its decorations and gatherings, but none of that reached me. I stayed home not out of loneliness, but out of choice. No calls came from Lily, no texts, no attempts to explain or reverse what she'd set in motion. The distance she created had become its own boundary, and I didn't try to step over it. That night, I sat in the living room listening to the steady hum of the furnace. Not a festive sound, not a symbolic one, just a working machine doing what it was built to do. The stability of it felt more comforting than any holiday greeting could have offered. A cardboard box rested near my feet, half filled with things I no longer had use for: outdated receipts, broken chargers, old keys that didn't match any locks anymore. A few items from years back, things tied to moments Lily and I once shared, slipped in as well. Not tossed out of anger, just placed into the pile because their purpose had run its course. After sealing the box, I carried it to the foyer, then stepped out to the porch. The air held a crisp bite, the kind Maine offers without apology. Warmth drifted from the doorway behind me, brushing my back with a faint reminder of the work done over the past weeks. I stood there for a moment, not thinking about past holidays, or the years that led to this one. The night didn't ask for reflection, only presence. When the cold started working through my sleeves, I turned back toward the house. A soft draft of heat moved past me as the door eased open, and I stepped through without hurry, ready to finish clearing the rest of the clutter waiting on the table.